Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. My name is Alexander Williamson, and I am here to guide you through a little episode on how to handle nano fish newly hatched, as well as some other fish. You know, there's some bigger fish that also have teeny tiny, itsy bitsy, teeny weeny little babies. And, bettas are one of those fish. So let's take a look real quick here at a really poor demonstration. So, pretend this is a newly hatched fish. It was in an egg, hatches free, and let's pretend there's an eyeball right here. Its mouth would be right here. This would be a yolk sac on a new fish. Now, a lot of species like crebensis or catfish like plecos and things, they'll have a yolk sac like that big blue turkey baster rubber there. And that yolk sac will feed them for the first, 2 days to a week or two even. And that's a lot of times in areas where they have more open water, food's a little less scarce, and usually in stagnant water or in shallow water, where you get rasboras and tetras and danios, bettas, labyrinth fish, gouramis, things like that. There is a lot of life in a puddle. And the life that's in these puddles is basically what we feed the babies. And we have here Infusoria, which I'm going to tell you how to make. I'm going to tell you where it comes from and the order in which to feed. And then we also have vinegar eels, which is the next size up in feeding. And then you can consult other videos on Daphnia and things like that for a few weeks in to a month in of a lot of these fish. When they can actually fit something the size of a sea monkey, a baby sea monkey, in their mouth. Right now, though, they are very teeny. And if you haven't bred fish before, I think you're going to be in for a treat when you see this. It's pretty miraculous how small they are. Before we get into all that, I also wanted to encourage all y'all to check out the links below if you need something. I've got Brine Shrimp Hatchery links, Brine Shrimp Direct links, and then Aquatic Arts is where I sourced a lot of the parents of these fish that I breed. And so there's some codes and coupons there if you're looking for something in particular, shrimp or fish wise, as well as food. But let's jump right in now to how and what this is. So right here we have a container of Infusoria. What is Infusoria? Infusoria is those little white cloudy whatever, the little dots, and they are a nano or microscopic. They're technically macroscopic because we can see the dots, but I digress. They are small life forms that live in most freshwater bodies. Now, most of these creatures have a life cycle with 6 stages, one of them being an egg stage where they can actually survive completely dried out, and that's totally fine. They can wait for water and then resurface. The right acidity, the right tannins, whatever it may be that floats their boat, they can wait for sometimes up to, there's some species that are 30, 40 years even. It's pretty crazy. Brine shrimp as well are that way. And so what I do is I get some pond water from a local body of water near my house. For me, it's a lake called Green Lake. I go get some pond water and I fill it with ram's horn snails from my various tanks that are just pest snails. You could use whatever snail you like, bladder snails or, whatever you want. But they do a really nice job of 2 things, and that is when we're going to start the culture, they're already going to be various larval and adult size microorganisms, from microcrustaceans, possibly seed shrimp, possibly even scuds and things like that. If you get nice muddy water, maybe where there's some leaves and organic matter at the bottom, and you just scoop some of that water up, you're almost guaranteed to get what you're looking for. And when we say infusoria, we actually are talking about quite a few different species in the hobby of small microorganisms that we just kind of lump into one category. However, there are strains and are species that get traded around the hobby because of how densely they grow, how long they live, and so forth. So if you want to get a culture or starter, check out some of the information and links I have in the description, or, just Google it. You can find information on it easily. But so you start with some pond water, put it in a tub. You can do this outside or in your house. I find it works quicker if you're somewhere between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit, that is. I guess let's say 23 to 26 Celsius. And you basically just put some old vegetative matter in here. And so your infusoria is going to live off of fermented, that has bacteria breaking it down, vegetative matter, and it needs some sort of carbs as well. And it also needs vitamins and minerals, just as anything does. And so the snails are in here to provide that from their mucus. So just like a snail or a slug outside in your garden leaves a little mucus trail, these guys have a mucus membrane that will actually have proteins and enzymes that feed the infusoria. Dun dun dun. So I put them in little half-gallon or gallon jugs, and I put a parboiled piece of lettuce into the tub, or I can just get some old leaves, put them in the tub. Also, plants out of your current fish tank. Sometimes you can get plants that are dead, and you just let them sit and rot in there basically for a month or two. And very soon, usually much quicker than that, the water will start to get cloudy, and you will see little white dots that move around all over the place. This is your infusoria. Now, to keep it going or to split it, all you have to do is add, for me, my recipe is for each of these containers, I take a couple rabbit pellets, which have a nice source of vegetative matter in it, like alfalfa or greens, microgreens, or sprouts. And that actually ferments just like you would have that hops or something ferment in beer. And bacteria and yeasts that are just naturally in the air will break that stuff down in the pellets. And the dormant eggs or the actual living adults and larval stages of what we want to feed the infusoria, the microorganisms, the plankton, will start to grow, as well as small crustaceans and copepods and things like that oftentimes. So they will start to grow, and then all you have to do is you throw in, take a saltine cracker, and for each half gallon, I would say every 3 to 8 days. It really just depends on how many snails you have. You don't want the water to be too foul, but you can throw a catappa leaf or some old trimmings of leaves from your tank into a container like this, and then you're going to throw in some saltine crackers, and then 3 or 4 days later a couple rabbit pellets, and alternate. That's what I find easiest, because I can keep saltine crackers and rabbit pellets enough for year and gallons of this stuff going forever, all year long. It just stays nicely in the shelf. Now, for vinegar eels, they're very similar, and we are going to look at the baby fish in just a second. Vinegar eels are very similar. You start the culture of these a little differently. They live in naturally unfiltered vinegar. So I go to the store, I buy apple cider vinegar, but you could also just take grapes or apples or peaches or any sort of fruit really that you could make a wine or a vinegar with, and you just let the yeast in the air land on it, leave the top open on the container for a while. And specifically outdoors on a summer or spring day is a really easy way to get a lot of them if you're not starting with a culture. But as I said, you can get a culture and it'll come to you, and you can make, endless amounts of this stuff. So you can also do that for $5 or $10 or whatever it may be online. But what I do is then I cut up apples. I choose just to cut up one whole apple, take Dr. Pepper or whatever, just bottles, 2-liter bottles, and 16-ounce bottles. And what I will do is I will poke holes in the top because they are oxygen breathing. And then these vinegar eels actually also have 6 stages of life, and they start as an egg, and they will be dormant inside a lot of fruits and other veggies and things, as well as with the yeast that is eating things. They get blown around in the wind and things like that, which is just pretty crazy that so much life is out there. Sometimes you can use your tank water to start culturing things, but it's not assured you're going to get vinegar eels. And with vinegar eels, I like using a start that is from a culture or actually from vinegar I'm making or wine I'm making. In the olden days, they used to be very upset that these creatures were in their wine, and they'd have to use cheesecloth to filter them out of their vinegar in their wine. But basically, there's no sugarcoating it. These guys look like little sperms, and they are very teeny. I don't even know. Let's see if we zoom in, maybe we'll be able to see them. But they are very teeny, just squiggly little lines, and you want to leave enough space between the apples or pears or whatever you use for them to come to the surface. You see them there at the surface? Yay! We can see them. And then if I put my finger next to it, that's how big they are. That's how small we're talking. And so you just use a pipette and pull them out and feed them to your baby fish. Now you can put your baby fish in a very small container if you're using clean water that's getting moved around, or you can use a little 5-gallon or 10-gallon tank like I do, or a 2.5-gallon. And, I've been holding you guys in suspense long enough, so let's look at the baby fish. Let's look at, first off, let's see if we can find the baby bettas. So let's see if I can clip this light on. All right, so the baby bettas, oh, there we go. There's one right there. So it's got the remnants of its yolk sac still on it, but its yolk sac does not carry much nutrients at all, and in fact, that's kind of just its guts. Now you can see here other egg sac remnants up on the top. You can see other little critters. These are just critters that live in your aquarium, your fish tank water. They live in your tap water sometimes, and they definitely live on your aquatic plants. Sometimes they live in the gut of your fish. And I have a whole special on Aufwuchs. That's AUFW, I believe, UCHS. It's a German word. But on these little layers of various bacteria, proteins, and microorganisms. Now, this is also things like little seed shrimp. That's what's moving on the sides there, the little white critters. And then we've got little copepods and crustaceans and things that naturally just are in the water when you have fish, and when you have a tank that's been cycled and is healthy. So as much as some people may not love that, it's just how it works. So what I do, let's stop zooming in so much. So that was a baby betta. Hopefully we'll find more in a minute here. But I also have some Somfongzi Rasboras and some Tin Winnie Danios that hatched over a week ago now in this same water. I see one right now. Let's zoom in while I can see it, because who knows when I'll see him again. But right here, this is probably a week old, I would guess. Maybe I don't know, somewhere between 4 days and 8 days old is how old it could be. And that is a free swimming one. He doesn't have the sticky head that its parents would, if it was a species where its parents cared for it, it would have you know, a rock or something that it would be placed against. Now that is why we saw the other fish, the younger fish and smaller fish, the little bettas. That's why they are stuck to the glass up here all along the top of the water line. There's more back in there, and they just hatched literally tonight. And so that's the difference between a free swimming one and when they're still kind of waking up. Now, also, some of the eggs didn't hatch. Some of them got rotten. You can see there, like the white one that molded over. But that's just kind of part of what happens when you're hatching them in a colony sort of way like this. Now, I could have had the father stay with the babies and hopefully take care of them, but I elected to actually just allow the fish to try to survive on their own in here. And we've got more fish and more little snails too. Just all sorts of little life living on the glass there. Now, at this size, with these teeny tiny species of fish, you also have to be careful. You don't want too many hydra or planaria, things like that, some of the more harmful pests, because they can actually hurt them, run down their immune system, and unfortunately kill them sometimes. Also, you can search my videos for more on that. But I wanted to finish up telling you about these guys and how to care for them and their food supply. So basically, with the vinegar, like I was saying, you get vinegar. I use apple cider vinegar. Get it from the store. Very cheap. I buy a gallon of it. I fill a bottle up halfway with vinegar. I take about a quarter of an apple and put it into each container of, say, 20 ounces. It's really up to you. You could put anywhere from just a few handfuls of chopped up little pieces in there to filling it up fairly well. To me, it doesn't seem to make a huge difference. There's enough life and food in the vinegar that's what they're eating, and the yeast that lives in the vinegar. So because of that, then in this bottle, it'll take some time. I usually keep them in the shade, and you don't want them to get too hot or too cold. So keep them in that middle range temperature. But this will then allow you to take a pipette, and with these, you can take a pipette and you can put them through cheesecloth or a little sieve or even a small net. And that will allow you then to just dip that right into the tank where your bibis are. Now, I can see there's more bibis swimming around if you see them just moving kind of jerkily across. There's a lot hiding down in the bottom, and in the coming days, it'll be amazing how many start to surface, especially now that we have 2 to 3 broods of different types of fish in here, even though they're very, very small. Even the free swimming ones are about 1 millimeter long, skinnier than an eyelash, and that's even at the widest part of their head. So last part of this is you're going to take a nail or a tack, poke holes in the bottle, and put, this is just filter floss. You can also use cheesecloth or even a shirt or something, or sponge, anything that allows air to pass through and fill back up into the void. You want to leave some air because those vinegar eels, they'll swim to the top, get air, and then go back down for their larval stages of life, as well as their adult stages. Once they reach adult stage, around 3 months old, they can then lay their own eggs. More than likely, if you buy a culture, you'll have a bunch of adults. And even if you got a starter from unfiltered vinegar that you created at home, you can look up recipes on how to make wine in vinegar, of course. You will have a decent amount that are old enough that that the fish will be able to see them and eat them. They're not just going to be teeny tiny little eggs. But the adults are actually so big that these fish right now, the ones on the glass, could not eat them yet. And so all I do is I take a pipette. I start with the Infusoria for at least the first week to maybe 3 weeks, depending on the species. Usually, same with Battis. And you saw there is a lot of life in this tank already. There really is. And so that helps us. We don't need to worry quite as much about feeding the babies because I've just not had adult fish in here that eat that. You can see there's a Daphnia just cruising around, and there's some more seed shrimp. But let's go ahead and put a pipette of the Infusoria in here. You can see how small they are, and that will provide some food. I'm going to move around some of this vegetation. That will provide food for the little fish. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But this is the first stage of life. This is really how you would breed any nano species and any species of fish that is a very, very small larval stage, especially if it doesn't have a yolk sac. And that's the rundown on Infusoria and also on the vinegar eel cultures. Now, I leave this this top here, the snails, everybody needs oxygen, so I usually just leave it ajar, but you can poke holes in it if you're not going to move it. However, this will be moving and going to someone else soon. All right, guys, thanks for joining. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you made it this long, staring at this seemingly empty tank that's actually full of life. And I'll have lots of other interesting videos coming out soon. You can see these fish will be growing up soon. Also coming up, we'll have the fun of having some of these Mara Rasboras. You can see, look at all their live cultures they're eating. And that's used not just for baby fish, but also for fattening up adult fish. You can see on the glass here how much there is. Fattening up adult fish, really it gets their instincts going and it gets them feeding and breeding so much better than anything else that you could do. And again, we've got the leaves in here, we've got the vegetative matter. It's not always the prettiest tank, but this is how I breed almost all of my nano fish. The Battis are all sleeping in here right now with the blue dream shrimp. All right, guys, I hope that helped. I hope you guys are doing well. Remember to take care of your critters, take care of the people around you, and of course, take care of yourself. Because if you don't do that, you can't do the other part. And of course, if half of us did half of that half the time, I think we'd have a world that's twice as good. So take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Swim on. There's a great sale going right now on the leopard plecos, as well as on quite a few nano fish at aquaticarts.com. Don't forget to use the coupon codes, and I'll also be doing a giveaway of a couple $100 soon from them as well. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Swim on. Bye.